Hello friends, today I am so excited to be sharing with you 14 life-changing money lessons I learned in my 20s. And yes, many of these tips come from my personal mistakes that I experienced firsthand. So let's jump into things. And remember, please stick around to the end for a bonus tip. Lesson number 1, or mistake that I made. I bought a car in my early 20s that I could not afford. And I took out a car loan. I went into debt for it as well. So on paper, when getting that car loan, everything seemed to check out. On paper, it looked good. I could afford the monthly payments, but I didn't consider other costs and repair expenses. And what's funny about it is the model of car I got, it was actually a Land Rover, and it had a ton of miles, over 100,000 miles. If you look up online one of the most expensive cars to maintain, you will see Land Rover at the very top of the list. So I didn't know this going into it, and I thought, it's probably a reliable car. I got it at a good car dealership, but turned out it had so many repairs, and I must say the gas was so pricey to fill up that thing. But now with inflation and gas prices, I couldn't imagine how expensive it would be in our day. As I mentioned, there were just a bunch of things that broke on it. The door broke where I couldn't lock it. There was a problem with like a sensor in the back, and also I blew out my tire. So there's a lot of lessons we can learn from this, right? It's important to buy a car that we know we can fully afford. But since then, friends, I'm happy to say that we did learn our lesson. And from that time and on, we've only purchased secondhand, reliable cars. We purchase them with cash. That way we don't have to have that debt on our shoulders or that monthly payment. The car company is Toyota, and we had 0 repairs, which is crazy, right? I would do oil changes by myself. Actually, I just remembered, I think we had to fix a flat tire a time or two, but besides that, there were no other major repairs, and it was just such a relief to be able to drive a car. I was in shock, honestly, that I could drive a car for so long, have so many miles, and it just kept going without any major repairs. So remember this tip, please don't go into unnecessary debt to buy a car that you can't afford. Consider gas and other repairs that will come into play too. Lesson number 2, beware of student loans. As you may know, student loans have become a big burden for many Americans. Did you know? Looking at the percent of student loan holders per age group, under 30 years old hold 33.7% of student loans. 30 to 39-year-olds have 28.1% of all student loans. 40 to 49-year-olds, 17.9%. 50 to 59-year-olds have 12.1%. And believe it or not, those age 60 and above have 8.3%. That's pretty crazy, right? And I think we all know someone who has some student loan debt, regardless of how old they are. So it's no wonder that student loan debt is the second largest debt in the USA. I wish I would have known this earlier, because at the beginning, I took student loans as if it was free money. I was like, woohoo, here's another loan, here's another loan. And I thought at the time, these are good things. Don't get me wrong, I understand there are some situations where people do need the student loan to be able to go to school, and in that situation, it's okay. But I must add that there are ways to decrease that debt burden. For example, I worked full-time while going to full-time school. That helped me pay off a lot of student debt. Also, it's important to look for scholarships. Whatever scholarships you can apply for, just do it. Grants are also an amazing thing. I was able to receive a few of those. One more thing I must add is that when you receive a student loan amount, before you accept it and it's dispersed to you fully, check out the actual amount. A lot of times they give you more than you actually need for your tuition and everything. So that's something I wish I would have done in the beginning, because I would just take it all. Yay, free money, even though it's not free and I have to pay it back with interest. So remember that you can take a smaller amount. Think about what work you have or what work you can do to earn more income, scholarships, grants, and things like that. I must say that after I learned this lesson, I completely changed everything I was doing. Like I mentioned, I was doing work full-time, and I was also slowly moving up in my positions at work. More to come on that later. And I was super lucky to find a company when I was doing my MBA that provided tuition benefits. So make sure to check with your employer on that as well. Lesson number 3, use credit cards wisely. So yes, I used to have some credit card debt before getting married to my sweetheart, Sean, and afterwards, she taught me so many important financial lessons. So one of the very first things I did was to get out of that bad consumer debt and get rid of that credit card balance I had. Notice that I didn't say beware and don't use credit cards at all at the beginning of this lesson. That is because you can learn to use credit cards very wisely. For example, my wife and I still use our credit card for some purchases, but we make sure to pay it off immediately. So why is it important to still use a credit card and pay it off wisely? A big reason is your credit score and other perks, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Lesson number 4, learn how to live within your means, and that includes your living space as well. As young college students, my wife and I always wanted to invest in real estate. My wife always had this investment mindset, you could say, and me personally, my grandfather owned a lot of real estate and was really into that, so I always had that spark of curiosity or that interest in doing it as well. I want to emphasize here, friends, that when we were first finding a property, we did not look for something too crazy or out of our budget. We ended up going with an older townhome built in the 1970s. It was remodeled, it fit our needs, and the best thing is that it didn't max out our budget each month. We bought our first property in 2017, and at the time it was only $100,000, which is very cheap compared to today's market. Why 20%, you may ask? It is to avoid the mortgage insurance. So the monthly payment, including the mortgage, utilities, internet, etc., was only around $900 a month. Later, after having higher paying jobs and thus more income, we were able to move out of the first property, buy a second property, a condo, and then rent out the first one. We then repeated the process and were able to buy a third property, a brand new house. Money lesson number 5, make sure to rent out any extra space you have, whether that's a room or just like a garage, outdoor space, shed space, and so on. You probably know of someone, or yourself even, that has an extra room or space that's not being used. So my wife and I definitely wanted to take advantage of that opportunity. With previous properties, we've had extra space to rent out to friends and family. I mean, it may be something that you're not comfortable with in the beginning, and that's okay, it's something to get used to, but honestly, it turned out really great for us and helped us reach our financial goals even faster. And as I mentioned, if you don't have an extra room per se, you can rent out extra space, such as a garage or a shed, or even a driveway. Lesson number 6, practice frugality. Give it a try and see how it goes. I loved it when I saw someone say that being frugal is not being cheap. It's just spending money on the things that matter the most to you. My wife and I are typically very frugal and save a lot of money throughout the year, but we spend it on things we enjoy, such as traveling. We absolutely love traveling and investing in things like that. I won't go into all of the ways to be frugal in this video today because it's practically endless, but a few things my wife and I did throughout college include not drinking coffee outside, making it at home instead, and also preparing meals in advance before going out. Making healthy meals at home, divvying those up, putting it in the fridge for later, and then it's just super easy to warm it up when you're outside at work or school. Remember, it's not really about how much money you can make, but how much money you can save. Of course, increasing your income is important, but saving your money is so important as well. Tip number 7, buy secondhand. This tip is great for so many reasons. While in our 20s, my wife and I would frequently buy things secondhand, which helped us save so much money. It's wonderful for everyone, but honestly, I loved incorporating this as a parent. My wife, Sean, and I would go onto Facebook Marketplace and would find toys that were super cheap or even free. Yes, you heard that correctly. We would get toys for free quite often. Once we even got a free, super big and wide double stroller for our 2 kiddos, and we were able to take that on our trip to New York City. So keep this in mind. Don't be afraid to go out there and buy things secondhand. Of course, make sure that the quality is good, but it can save you so much money in the long run. Also, this applies to cars as well. I touched on this in a previous tip, but my wife and I currently only buy secondhand, reliable used cars. And if possible, buy with cash so you don't have to go into that unnecessary car loan debt. Lesson number 8, stay up to date on your credit score. So a credit score is important for a variety of reasons, but one major reason is that when applying for a mortgage, it can help you get a better interest rate on your loan. It shows a lender that you are in charge of your debt. But please, I beg of you, do not go into unnecessary consumer debt. Make sure to pay it off and use your credit cards wisely, as mentioned previously. It's super nice because with some companies, you can check for free once a year your credit score. And one other huge reason to make sure you are up on your credit score is because something bad could happen. And this was a mistake I made during my early 20s. I didn't check my credit score often, and I actually had a debt collections account on it. I was super shocked when I got a call from a debt collector telling me, hey, you have unpaid debt that you need to pay off. I was super confused, and at the beginning, I didn't believe it. So that really hurt my credit score, and at the time we were applying for a mortgage, but we weren't able to get the very best interest rate, unfortunately. As for the debt collection account, it came from an unpaid tuition amount for my previous college semester. The funny thing is I didn't sign one form with my school, and that ended up making the tuition not disperse to my account. I had no idea that it did not disperse though. So anyway, please be careful, friends. Don't make the same mistake I did and regularly check your credit score. That leads us into lesson number 9. learn how to negotiate and deal with debt collectors. Number 1, verify the debt. Make sure to not give out super personal information and have them send you their debt collection information via email or mail. And please double check with the establishment that sent your debt to the collections. Number 2, know your rights. Debt collectors aren't allowed to just call you whenever they want. Outside of working hours is not allowed, and they cannot harass you. Also, they cannot discuss personal information with people besides you or your spouse. Number 3, try to negotiate. My wife and I were able to successfully negotiate down our debt collection amount quite a bit, and I want to share a little bit more about that now. First off, I think it's important to share with the debt collector that you have a very good attitude, a willing attitude to pay it off. That makes them feel better, that you want to work with them, that you want to get it paid off as soon as possible, even if you don't have the means to do that in the moment. Also explain your experience, because at the time my wife and I were just fresh college students in our early 20s. We didn't have a lot of income, and we were just working really hard to try to get through school and so on. So it's good to explain your situation so that you can get on the same page. The debt collector was able to give us a low payment monthly plan, so we saved up money in the meantime, then called him back to negotiate paying off the debt with one lump sum of money. So in total, our debt collection amount was about $6,000, but we were able to talk it down to $3,500, almost half of the original amount. Lesson number 10, be the very best you can be in the workplace. So basically what I learned is to not get too comfortable. And in fact, I'm so grateful for my wife who helped me along the way, because every time I got comfortable with my job responsibilities and my role, I would be pretty happy, but also, I don't know, lacking a bit. I wanted to learn more. My wife would come along and be like, hey, it's time to move up. So I would apply for new positions or a new job. Essentially, my journey went from first being a customer support representative to being the top upseller in the company to a supervisor. And then at that point, I moved to another company as an account manager, and then to another company as a product development specialist. So yes, it is great for personal growth to keep trying to gain more skills, knowledge, and move up in the workplace, but it also increases your revenue quite a bit. And I was fortunate to have a bump in pay with each of those position or job changes. Money lesson number 11, don't be afraid to start a side hustle. The biggest recommendation I can give here is to start small. My wife and I tried out a variety of different entrepreneur efforts, which were really fun, and we gained a lot of experience. We've had our own small clothing brand before. We also love to help watch our friends and family's pets. This is such an easy way to make money. My wife has a lot of friends who live overseas, so whenever they would go back to visit their families, we would watch their pets, and it was such a fun experience. And another side hustle I did was to have a bit more cash. We called it my freedom money. So extra cash to use for fun things, such as buying a PlayStation or something like that. And this money came from donating plasma. And I donated plasma off and on for many years throughout my 20s. And don't worry about costs. I know there's a lot of things that require a lot of startup capital, but there definitely are ways to start a side hustle or a business without a lot of startup money. For example, starting a blog or a YouTube channel are great ways that the cost is very low. The barrier to entry for cost is very low. You'll just want to make sure you are committed. Being committed and passionate about what you're doing really is key. Also, along with that is consistency, right? Working on it every day and creating a habit are really the building blocks to give you success. This next money lesson I learned throughout my 20s and I still practice today, which is to minimalize. A great way to get started with minimalizing or simplifying your life is to look around your immediate space, where you live. What do you really need and what is just wants? So essentially it's doing an inventory. What do you actually use and what do you not use? And a question I love to ask is, does this item or purchase add value to my life? And on top of that, is it more of a temporary or long-term value? So I mean, it's more of a spectrum, right? Of how much happiness it'll give you and how much true value or meaning will add to your life. And implementing this tip to minimize your life and your surroundings really makes it easier to save money. And it shifts the focus to what matters most: family, relationships, experiences. And one more tip with this lesson is to implement some sort of cool down rule. When my wife and I go shopping, whether to the grocery store or buying something, and I think this is normal to get really excited about a certain item that you want to buy immediately, but we help remind each other, let's have a cool down period. Let's wait 24 hours and see how we feel after those first feelings of excitement and everything wear off a little bit. So I highly recommend, friends, that you try this out too. A lot of times we just get so excited about something that we forget it's actually not something we need. Okay, the 13th lesson, learn how to invest and start now. Unfortunately, schools don't love to teach you about how to invest and different investment strategies. So what can we do? Fortunately, it's easier than you think. My wife and I are both self-taught investors. We currently have most of our investments in the S&P 500 or in the total stock market. Yes, we do invest in some other stocks or funds for fun, but the bulk of everything is in the S&P 500. What's really key here is to start now. Even if you're in your later 20s or 30s even, don't worry about the past, just start now. In addition to the stock market, there are tons of ways to invest, right? And I shared a little bit already, but my wife and I also love investing in real estate. In total, we've had 3 properties, but we have since sold the first one. And if you have an employer that offers a 401k match, take advantage of that. My wife and I definitely did this back in the day when we had employers that matched 401ks. Also, if you don't know already, just learn about basic investment concepts such as Roth versus traditional investment accounts. And one more thing, if your employer offers an HSA, take advantage of that because it has triple tax benefits. All right, friends, thank you so much for sticking around to this point. Now we're at tip or lesson number 14, which is to save up an emergency savings account. It is a safety net that provides peace of mind, and also it's for when, not if, but for when unexpected expenses do happen, such as sudden job loss or a car repair, medical expenses, the list goes on and on. My wife and I currently have enough money in our emergency savings account to cover 6 months of living expenses. So it's a habit, you could say. My wife and I love putting our emergency savings into a high yield savings account. The reason we put this money in a high yield savings account is because number 1, it has a better interest rate than a traditional savings bank account. And number 2, it's very easy to pull out. It's readily accessible. And number 3, the place we hold it at is FDIC insured. All right, time for a bonus tip for you parents out there. Tip number 15, invest in your kids' future education with a 529 savings plan. My wife and I have created 2 different 529 plans, one for each of our children. The amount we used to put for each kid was $100 a month, so $200 a month total. Now that we moved abroad and technically have a lower income, we have decreased that, but we still want to keep contributing to their future education. So now it is $15 per kid a month, which is $30 total a month. And it's just really nice to start this type of account because it has tax advantages and it can be used for school expenses in the future. So it is my wife and I's dream to have both of our children be able to go to school and not have to go into debt. To make this dream a reality, please like and subscribe so that we can grow this channel and hopefully make more income so that we can give them a better future too. Because honestly, right now we're not very satisfied with the amount we're giving them each month in their 529 plans. We want to increase it a ton. All right, thank you so much everyone. I hope you found these tips insightful. I will see you next video. Bye-bye.